Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in from all over. My name is Wesley Wolf-Bear Pinkham, and I'm the technical host for today. Our Thursdays with Friends conversation comes to you 32 days before the new Congress, when Congress will start its 117th session. And today we are only 49 days before the Joe Biden administration takes the reins of our government and the executive branch. Our host for today is Diane Randall, FCNL General Secretary, and her guest is Sister Simone Campbell of the Sisters of Social Service, who is the Executive Director of Network, the Lobby for Catholic Social Justice. They will talk about the effectiveness and importance of lobbying from a place of faith. Here's Thursdays with Friends host Diane Randall and her guest, Sister Simone.
Thank you, Wesley, and welcome everyone from across the country. It is great to see you again on this Thursday, and I am tremendously excited to welcome Sister Simone Campbell as a guest today on Thursdays with Friends. Sister Simone is a terrific colleague for our work here in Washington, D.C., lobbying on a whole range of issues, which she will be talking about in a little bit. But let me tell you just a little bit about Simone. She, as Wesley said, she's the executive director of Network, which is the lobby for Catholic social justice. And any of you have worked in the peace field or the social services field know that Catholic social teaching is an incredibly grounded and compelling way to look at the world and to address the world. So it's a real joy to work with her. Before she joined Network, she founded the Community Law Center in Oakland, California. She is an attorney herself, and she served there for 18 years as the lead attorney. In 2004, she was recruited to come to be the executive director of Network, which was established in 1971. So 10 years ago, Sister Simone wrote the Nuns Letter supporting the healthcare reforms in the Affordable Care Act. Despite the opposition of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, which is the official voice of the Catholic Church in the U.S., the letter was sent to Congress, leading to the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Sister Simone has been awarded the Franklin D. Roosevelt for Freedoms Award for some of her work dealing with working with the Leadership Conference of Women Religious. So in addition to being a courageous and outspoken sister, she is an author, a speaker, including at FCNL's annual meeting a few years ago. She has made bus tours famous with the Nuns on the Bus tour. And one of the joys I've had is lobbying with Sister Simone, where she shares some of those stories, which I think she'll do with us today. So without further ado, let me welcome Sister Simone Campbell. Unmute. You're still muted.
There we go. Great to be with you, and great to be with all of you from around the country. This is exciting.
Yeah, great. Well, so Simone, your day in, day out work is advocating on the Hill. And I'd love you to talk just a little bit about what motivates you to do this work, and also then to talk a little bit about what you see as coming from a place of faith in advocating with Congress.
Well, kind of the basic question, why do you do it? And for me, it really comes rooted in our faith. Coming from the Christian tradition, Jesus was always about walking towards people who were in trouble and advocating. What do they need? What do you ask? How do you, trying to make things better? And the stories that he told were about that. I mean, that is at the heart of what the gospel is. And then in my tradition, in the Catholic tradition, that we have all of this writing starting in 1892 with Rerum Novarum, which is the encyclical the Pope wrote about the right to organize for labor. And so it's out of the roots of that really profound teaching that motivated me to stay involved and do this work. as a child, I grew up in Southern California, but I watched the civil rights movement and was really touched by young people standing up. And I thought, I have to do that. So here I am, all these years later, still trying to stand up and be faithful to that call. It's critical. But I think the thing that's important for all people of faith to know is that our advocacy has more power because because we don't advocate for ourselves.
Mm.
We come with an advocacy for those who are most marginalized, care for the earth, care for peace. All of the issues that we work on together are about making our world a better place for the common good, not about what my particular service needs. And I think that makes us unique. And the second piece is that I know is different for us at Network is we really focus on and talk about bringing a care, not just for the folks we advocate for and with, but also bringing a care for the person that we are lobbying.
Mm.
And for me, that got expressed most powerfully the first time I lobbied in person, Paul Ryan. And that it was after our first bus trip. I'd been going around the country railing against his budget. His staff invites me to come lobby him, and bringing that care for him as well as the care for the issue that we were lobbying. So he's telling me how smart he is and all the numbers he knows. And, I'm talking about the people we met who would be impacted. But then he says, well, I leave my family in Janesville and I don't have an apartment here in DC. I sleep on a cot in my office. And for me, coming with compassion for him, my response was, well, is that good for you or for your family? How do you ever get a break? Are you taking care of yourself? And he couldn't handle it at that moment. But one of the things that happened, I think, because of that care was that he kept an eye on me after that, and I kept an eye on him. And about a year later, I testified in front of him, and he defended me from then Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn's attack on me. But he said, "Oh no, Sister Simone's well within the teaching of our faith," and so he validated. I was the Democratic witness, but he validated me. But it was based on relationship, and I think relationship is the unique piece that people of faith can bring to advocacy, that we care about the people we're lobbying as well as what we're lobbying for.
We often, when we train people around the country to advocate with Congress, we talk about that our one of the ways that we speak about our faith as Quakers is to look for that of God in every person. And I think that's what you're talking about to some degree. It may be different language a little bit, but it is recognizing the humanity of every single person we encounter, and to build this relationship. One of the things, Simone, that we were talking about this week was this question of what changes we might see with a new administration and a new Congress in January that begins. And you mentioned this idea of needing to begin really moving from an individualistic perspective to a more community perspective. Could you talk about that a little bit in terms of specific policies and how you see that having an impact?
Oh, right. And I think this is showing up even more strongly than in the past because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
And the pandemic has shown that we are connected. And the way it gets put out by some is my right to not wear a mask. Well, it might be your right to get yourself sick or everybody else around you, but there's social impact to that. And so how I think one of the key pieces is moving towards this idea, again, that we have a shared responsibility for the common good. And I think one of our mistakes has been too often focusing on our rights, my right. And that's a very individual approach to it. And so often civil rights has gotten reduced down to the single case because most of the the impact has come from case law. So there's single cases where you make bit by bit, we improve the law. But the problem is we don't talk so much about civil obligations, and that if we have civil rights, we have civil obligations. And our responsibility is to live within those obligations. And that's the untold story of really what has been the story of our nation, we the people. It's only rights and obligations can we move forward. And so I think as we shift during this pandemic to this awareness of shared responsibility of the disease, the virus makes it abundantly clear we're in this together. And so trying to make that clear.
You know, we've a lot of the people participating today have heard us speaking a lot about the COVID relief package. Amelia has been on is on the call today, and she's really been leading this work for us. And I know you lobbied. You know, we've done this with the Washington Interfaith Staff Group and gone to a lot of lobby meetings to try to get a new package passed. And in fact, I think one of the things that we always ask people to as a takeaway from these calls is to take action, and we still are asking you to take action on COVID relief. But I'm wondering, Sister Simone, could you talk a little bit about what you see as the specific, some of the priorities from your perspective? And I think it would be great if you could share some of what you've seen in your travels with Nuns on the Bus. I mean, you actually had a Nuns on the Bus tour this fall, and you did it virtually, but you still were engaging and encountering people around the country. And those stories that you hear and that you've shared I have watched how they have an impact on individual lawmakers. So could you just pull out a couple of those in relation to what we're talking about right now with this COVID relief package, why there's such a need?
Oh, well, let me think. I'm going through my Rolodex in my head, figuring out which are the best ones here. I think one of the conversations that we had was a dialogue across geographical divides. And we did this one up in Michigan where we had folks from rural communities, folks from urban communities. And it was really a powerful conversation. But the piece that really relates to COVID is the lack of access to healthcare, both in the urban setting as well as in the rural setting. And the fact that healthcare facilities are in rural communities, these two hospitals had closed, they were talking about that, and they were building a new one that was going to be about 45, 50 miles away, but it wasn't ready yet. So they didn't really have adequate treatment facilities in Michigan, which is well, like the rest of the nation, a hotspot. But then what surprised me is the urban folks were talking about how that the various hospitals and medical, what do they call them, groups had moved out to the suburbs. And so that even the urban central core didn't have enough facilities to deal with the COVID impact. And where this connects with the COVID packages, our states need money to help fund hospitals, especially in rural and the inner city area, because it's about Medicaid expansion. It's about access to healthcare. It's ensuring that our people get treatment. So there is a direct connection to money and the lived experience of these people so worried that they weren't going to be able to get care. But it's shared between the city and the rural reality.
Yeah. And once you lose a job, whether you're living in a rural or suburban or urban area, and you have no income to pay the rent or mortgage or buy food, and you can't go out and work anywhere because of the pandemic, people are in pretty desperate straits. And so we are obviously very hopeful that this new concept that's been introduced by, I don't know if they're calling it the Gang of Eight or some group of 8 senators, we'll see some movement in the next few days. And so that I think the hope is that in the lame duck session, we'll actually see action in this even before the new Congress comes in. But wow, go ahead.
Can I just add to that? Because what's really needed is pressure to make sure that they do it now, because these various programs expire right after
Right.
Christmas. And so our people would be left with nothing. And the fact that they don't, well, it's been hard to get money to the states for reasons I don't understand. Mitch McConnell has resisted it. And there's finally some in that. There is some money in this proposal to individuals who are unemployed. Uh, it really is critical.
It really is. And I want to come back to where we started talking about the role that people of faith and faith communities can play. And your statement that we're not profiting. Neither network nor FCNL takes any government money. We're not getting a benefit by asking for these things. And so I do think that congressional offices may see us in a different way than they see a lobbyist who comes in looking for something that's going to give them a direct monetary benefit. And these voices, I mean, Network and FCNL are two organizations, but we work with a whole range of faith leaders plus people across the country who bring this ethic and who bring these stories. And I think that is really, really powerful now in Washington, D.C. And I think it will be as we move into the next Congress. People are weary of the kind of harsh rhetoric and what often feels like unkind and really terrible policies that have emanated from this administration, and I think are ready for a new day. And I guess I'm just interested in hearing you say what's your hope as you think about this new administration and the new Congress coming in terms of what changes we might see.
Well, a lot of people are worried because the margins for both parties in both the House and the Senate are smaller, or I mean that there's not a big a majority both in the House and the Senate. However, the Georgia election turns out, I actually think that's good news, because if we can get Senator McConnell to join the human race and to see he's got a part of the solution. So anybody from Kentucky, you're in charge of that project. But if we can help the moderate middle see that we need to work together for the sake of our people. And that's why storytelling is so important. Our people are suffering, and we've got to lift up that mirror and our picture and let our representatives look at it and then say, so what are you going to do? How are you going to help? It's our responsibility as a nation to care for our people for the common good. And then don't get seduced by this. Okay, maybe I'm getting too political, but don't get seduced by this idea, oh, we can't afford it. It is nuts, because the only reason we're in any sort of problem with this big deficit or the debt is because of the 2017 GOP, only voted for by the GOP, only with no hearings with Democrats, no amendments by Democrats allowed. They passed this tax cut. It was even bigger than what business was asking for. It's ridiculous. So for the sake of our people, we need to say we cannot not afford this if our nation's to survive, if our people are to survive. This is a crisis.
It is a crisis, and the economic. I think we are seeing. I mean, obviously, we've seen the kinds of problems that are caused by the big economic divide between the haves and the have-nots, and it is only growing larger. And the pandemic has exacerbated that in ways that we're going to see fallout for years. And so, I think that what we're going to be needing is whatever happens in this lame duck session and for COVID relief probably will not be sufficient to really make a difference for those people who have lost employment or the people who never had employment. I mean, that, let's face it, poverty was still, while there had been some progress on it, we still have a huge problem with poverty in this country.
And the issue of wages, the fact that wages never have gone up. I mean, they inched up a teeny little bit after the Great Recession, and that's only been in the last 2 years. So not only do we have issues of unemployment, we have huge issues of low wages. And
Yeah,
the fact that so many people have to work more than one job and are now maybe holding on to a part-time job, maybe. But
right.
we've got to raise wages. That is just required. And when you look at all these news about how everybody in the stock market is doing so great, and they create an equivalency between the stock market and the economy, don't fall for it.
Not for everyone, that's for sure. You know, Simone, your book, I love the title of your most recent book called A Hunger for Hope, which is available. We're not selling it, but you can order it online. But talk a little bit about that title. And I guess I'm interested in hearing you talk. One of the things that we hear from FCNL constituents around the country is that when they directly advocate, when they go into a meeting in a congressional office, they leave often feeling a sense of hope, even if they're not in agreement with their lawmaker. So have you experienced that? And why do you think that happens?
Oh, and thanks for putting the book up. Well, my whole thesis is that hope is a communal virtue, and that when I have never been able to go off by myself when I'm feeling down and generate hope, it just doesn't work, because it's about our relationships with each other, working for each other, being involved in this sacred responsibility to work for the common good. And so my book really is about a prayer practice that nourishes that communal sense, roots us in our reflective quality. And for you as Quakers, in your silence, I mean, that's a practice that I'm talking about, is silence in a kind of a Zen meditation style. And then how we do it, how we create community, 5 characteristics of a community that nurtures a prophetic imagination. And then I apply it to various social issues, being an advocate. But the key piece is to be anchored in community where we do it together, because that's where hope lives vibrantly, is in the midst of community. And what I've discovered is when I'm feeling down, then I need to get more engaged. I need to step in. And that stepping in is like the experience at a lobby visit. It's like, oh, yeah, I can do it. It's possible. We had a great conversation, or we made our point. So
We make a connection, and it is a way to build. I love that term, prophetic imagination. That's a wonderful way for us to keep a focus looking forward. We have a couple of questions, and one of them is about Rick asked, can we be moderate and strident at the same time? And to me, that's kind of a version of how do maybe that's not what he meant. So I'll let you take that, but it's also, how are we loving and also, addressing the truth? How do we hold both of those, particularly when we're talking to lawmakers?
Oh, absolutely. The care and concern that we have for the person that we're lobbying, but is critical. But the urgency of the stories that we know, how can I mean, that's why I tell stories, is to try to communicate the anguish. For me, is that I'm getting a picture to tell you, is like I carry Margaret's picture. Margaret died in 2012 because the Affordable Care Act had not yet been fully implemented. And her sister and partner brought me her picture in Cincinnati on the first bus trip. I've carried it ever since, but it's as a reminder of the urgency of access to healthcare. No more Margaret should die unnecessarily. And so I carry this to be able to tell the story. I've got a whole bunch of other artifacts that I carry too, but this one's the easiest to explain. And I think that we can be very respectful, loving, thoughtful to misguided people who don't know the story.
Right.
If you don't know the story, and so I told Paul Ryan another story on that very first lobby visit, which is sort of ingrained in my memory. But he said, well, I told him about a family who was going to be affected by his SNAP cuts and all this. And he said, well, they're not the targets of my program. No, but they're going to be your victims. there's got to be another way. And so being clear about the consequences, unintended though they may, and then urging people to find a solution. Let's fix this. I know you don't intend this, or at least I hope I know you don't intend it. So give them the benefit of the doubt there, but then said, let's fix it. Let's do this together.
Yeah, but I do believe that those of us coming from a faith perspective do approach our advocacy in a way that we have an expectation that lawmakers are at least open to doing the right thing, even if they don't always do the right thing. And so some of it is giving, that is another way that we convey hope, is by putting that out as an expectation. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I want to bring up a couple of other questions and comments to ask you to address. We just have a few minutes left here. So someone says, thank you, Sister Simone, for bringing up the urgency of a living wage. We need a living wage. And I think that's almost $22.50 an hour these days. Another one says, another question from YouTube, because we have people joining us on both Facebook and YouTube. What do you see as the shared power of network and FCNL in actually moving legislation in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, good questions. Yay for a living wage. It's really important. That $22 figure is if the minimum wage had kept pace with the same increase as the increase in productivity. And so that is like a baseline. Even getting to 15 doesn't get us far enough. And that's true across the whole country. So don't let people tell you, well, there's Mississippi and Alabama. We found in our rural roundtables that rent is almost as expensive in rural parts of the South as it is in the urban South. So there's a need for increased wages. Go for it. And I think post COVID, I think there's going to be a real natural momentum that we can get. And the piece is, what I've seen us be effective. Now, the best effect ever was my nun's letter. I swore after that, if I never did another good thing in my life, because I know 29 votes I got of Catholic members of Congress in the House of Representatives that passed it. And President Obama kissed me right there and said, thank you for getting it over the top. So that was the best experience ever. But what I do know is that our lobbying, we work on the small pieces of big legislation and get our pieces in. The FCNL lobbyists, they're fabulous. Amelia and crowd, you guys are the best. And so we work together, we create a strategy, we go at it, and we can have many many groups making the same ask. And that kind of wears them away, and we slip stuff in. It doesn't show up. It's not in the billboards. It's not in the headlines, but it makes a difference.
It does make a difference. And you and I have been in meetings where, and you may be more than I, but where congressional staffers or members, elected officials will say, thank you for being here. I mean, it is for them. It is, as you said, it's a ministry of some kind, sometimes to those members and those staffers as well. We are still getting more questions, and we only have a couple of minutes left, but Tom writes, and people can read this in the chat, about a Colorado immigrant rights effort and a campaign, and asks how Network and FCNL are joining this. I can't speak for Network, but we tend not to join at a local level because we work with colleagues who are doing that, like AFSC and others. I know there's certainly a lot of Catholic groups that are doing work at the border on immigrant rights. And so part of what happens is when we have colleagues who are doing work in the field, and whether that's on immigration, whether that's on climate change, whether that's on economic justice, their participation in the advocacy makes our advocacy so much more powerful in Washington, D.C. And so I just encourage you who have stories to share about the campaigns and the work that you're doing locally to bring those to your own local elected officials in their advocacy. Simone, we're about out of time. What parting words of hope would you like to offer to people here at the beginning of December, at a time that is a very somber and challenging moment with this pandemic, but also with a sense of hope about a new administration?
Well, this time in our tradition is called Advent. And it's this whole idea of waiting through time for a promise, the realization of a promise. And that's sort of how I feel in this political time, is that we're waiting for a new administration. But the thing is, the new administration is not going to be magic. It's not the magic wand. It's going to require us fully engaged to make change happen. And our engagement's got to be with our elected officials. But I think in this time of division in our nation, it's also got to be talking to our neighbors, talking to our relatives, inviting other people into the conversation so that we can indeed weave a community together. And if we weave a community together, there's hope alive in the midst. So,
Amen. Thank you so much, Sister Simone, for joining us today. And thank you to all of you who joined us on the call here on Zoom or on YouTube or Facebook. I know many of you have been involved with FCNL for years. Many of you are financial supporters and help make this work go. And most of all, you're advocates. So please take action. We do need to just continue the pressure now during this lame duck session. And, you can believe we'll be back to talk to you in January again about the next priorities that we'll be doing more of. I will say that in 2 weeks, my guest will be Diana Olbaum, who is the Director of Foreign Policy and Senior Strategist here at FCNL. So I hope you'll join us. Diana's going to give a little bit of a look back on 2020 and some of the peace issues that we've worked on, as well as a forecast into 2021. So Simone, thank you so much for being with us today. You're a real hero to me, and I just really value you. So thanks so much.
Thanks for the invitation. I've loved it. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
My old friend, I wish you well wherever you may roam. In my heart, you're still with me, and our song goes ever on. Though the miles may separate us, and our words are few and far between, your voice still echoes in me, like a shell sings the song of the sea. Storms of life have come between us, and they try to keep us apart. Like a robin returning in springtime, you have settled back safe in my heart. So we go our own ways, and our paths they twist and they bend, as this whole world keeps turning around. You will always be my old friend, as this world